It says starting recording. I guess it's recording. There. Okay, now it started recording. Okay, so today is Thursday, November 11th, 2021. It's Veterans Day, and in the other Anglo countries, it's Remembrance Day today. Who is that? Oh, is it Cricket? Oh.
It's Cricket.
Yeah, she's mostly black in a black background, so it's hard to make her out there.
It's a piece of a cat.
Yeah.
That's all you can see is the white part of it.
Anyway, this is Aunt BB, aka also known as Barb Hammer, which a lot of people say is a fake name, but that's my real name. And joining me today is Scott Creighton. Previously of the churchdog42 channel on YouTube, but gone from there. And now he's
previously
on AmericanEveryman
channel.
And that's your Bitchute channel. So you are AmericanEveryman once again, and Nomadic Everyman on your blog. And that used to be AmericanEveryman too before it was gone.
In honor of Veterans Day, can I do this real quick?
Yeah, do whatever you want. Yeah.
Dum, 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 dum.
That's for James.
That's for you, James. You know the lyrics, James. Sing it along with me. Dum 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 dum.
Oh my God.
Theme for the young viewers who have no idea what that fucking was. How you doing?
I'm okay. So we were supposed to talk yesterday, just an informal chat, but I think we both pooped out. I was tired. I kind of was dozing off, and you went to sleep too.
I didn't poop out. It was the anniversary, so I was kind of hanging out here, and having a few drinks and sitting and watching one episode after another of the first 48, where they try to solve some murder, and they just stand around and go, "We can't figure it out." Until someone calls up and goes, "Hey, I know who did it." Woo! But that really is, if it weren't for snitches, no murder in the country would be solved. All that CSI shit, CSI Miami, where they science the shit out of it, and then follow up that episode with the first 48, where they just stand around and go, "Gee, I hope someone calls and tells us who did it." There's no such thing as CSI. They don't even. We need a snitch. Someone give me a snitch.
Yeah.
So I watched a bunch of that yesterday, and then I fell asleep in my chair with my dog, drinking Jim Beam.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we were supposed to talk about, the anniversary a little bit.
Yeah.
And that was sad.
Well, it's a little dark for this conversation, so.
Yeah, well, I knew your mom for a year, a little over a year.
Yeah.
And I
She
miss her too.
She liked it. Yeah.
She was funny. Yeah.
She's good people.
Yeah,
so you have been trying to make a video unsuccessfully about Cuba.
Yeah, since Saturday was the first attempt, and I hadn't had any problems with my recording software until then. And so I've been trying to work that out. I've actually attempted to make that video in Cuba 3 times, so I'm still going to try again. I think I've worked out all the bugs in the recording software, but yeah. Oh, yesterday. Oh, you know what I was doing yesterday? So actually, I was tired yesterday because I was so frustrated the night before trying to record for the 3rd time that video in Cuba. I was just so pissed off that night. I didn't get much sleep, so I was tired yesterday. And I went to this local place I've mentioned to you before that makes cider. Mm-hmm. It's the first time since they have introduced the vaccine card here in British Columbia, Canada. That place is technically a bar. And when we arrived at the cidery, or whatever you want to call it, they had a sign up that you wouldn't be served unless you had the vaccine card. And I was anticipating something like that happening, but you know how we got around it? They still served it. It was a club, like a cider club pickup event. So it was a social event. So we were not, my husband and I were not discriminated against because we don't have vaccine cards. So they still served us, you know.
But
Yeah.
just because it was a specific event?
Yeah, it was a club event. So that's why we were not discriminated against. Normally anyone visiting the cider place, like it's a little bar, people go for tastings, and they do have some food. But because this was a club event, we were not discriminated against. And I was really anxious. I saw this sign and we went in and I said, well, we'll see what happens here. They didn't bring up the vaccine card. So I was like, dodge that bullet.
I know you like the cider. I remember that.
Yeah.
Is it good though?
Yeah, it's very good because it's not super sweet. Like most commercial ciders on the market are just, they have so much sugar. I don't like that. And they make lots of different varieties and they're always come up with new types. And you get a little bit of a break if you belong to the club. You get a bit of a discount. And they have these pickups 3 times a year. And they'll serve you a little bit of cider, a glass, maybe with a little food. They've gotten a little chintzy with the food at these events, but it's nice. You get to drive out in the countryside and get away. And there's so few things that we can do now. We can't go to restaurants and theaters, so that's a little outing.
Well, we mentioned James before, and James lives in. I can dox him this much because he's got this on his name, James from New York City. Fuck the fucking vaccine passport. That's all. That's his name.
Really?
On Steam. It's like 2 paragraphs.
Oh yeah.
Right. But I mean, so I can dox him that much. So he lives in New York City. I can't imagine what it's like. I mean, I can because everyone was locked down for a little while. And even down here in Florida, we were locked down for a little while.
Yeah.
But nothing like this, where you have places are open, but just not for you.
Yeah.
That's got to be. I mean, tell me about that. How is that?
Frustrating. It's frustrating, and it gets to me. I realize I do get down, and I'm usually pretty down because there's just constantly this where, even in my building, the other residents, yeah, one of them, there were 3 of them went after me. 2 or 3 went after me in the lobby because I wasn't wearing a mask. And there's no rule that you have to wear a mask inside the building, but they had a case of COVID. A guy that we know wasn't vaccinated. He got COVID. He was sick for a couple of weeks. He's fine. But they're just so paranoid. They just and the mask thing is just ridiculous. And then if you don't wear a mask, they get upset. A lot of them will get upset with you. So it gets me down. It gets me down that the fucking border is closed. And, we live right on the border. And that's partly why we moved here, because we wanted to go across the border, and I used to go have lunch with a couple of women I knew over there in Washington State. Can't do that anymore. So it does get me down. Yeah, it just does.
Well, I'm sorry.
And I'm lucky compared to other people. I'm lucky,
How so?
Well, I'm not in the job market, so there are people having to deal with this on their jobs with the masks and vaccine requirements. I don't have to deal with that. So, and the homeless situation has gotten worse because they were shutting down so many things and people were struggling as it was. And now, yeah, I mean, homeless camps everywhere. Huge homeless camps. Tents. If they're lucky, they have tents and blankets. If they're lucky, but I have heard the city will they shut them down. They clear them out every now and then.
If you get a chance, maybe you guys could take a drive and you could just take your cell phone and just kind of record some of those, because I've seen them from places like New York, and I've seen videos of San Francisco and Los Angeles, but I don't recall seeing any from Vancouver or from the area that you're up, which is Vancouver, right?
Yeah, we're outside of Vancouver. Yeah.
All right, so that might be an idea. to put that up on.
Yeah, the camps pop up and then they disappear because they get cleared out. So they come and go. But they're everywhere. Not that they're here. They're like most of them are small, like in little parks or whatever. They got their tents up or whatever. Along the railroad tracks here, there's a huge camp. Yeah, and it reminds me. I think about the Great Depression. There were people along the rail. They hop on trains trying to get to some place, or maybe they had a chance of something. But camped out along railroad tracks.
Went downtown for the deposition. I told you about that. That was a week ago tomorrow. And afterwards, I had to go find it. Went to Subway to wait to call the cab situation.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up being down there about an hour and 15 minutes just to fucking leave. And I remember when you came down and we took a little walk on the Riverwalk, and the Riverwalk was fucking depressing as shit. And so we walked into downtown, and all we saw were fucking homeless junkies. And this was like a Tuesday. Remember that?
Right. Yeah.
Guess what? That's what downtown was.
Yeah.
That's what downtown was. I was next to a building, and all these young fucking kids kept going in and out from Uber cars and shit like that. People dropping them off, people picking them up.
Mm-hmm.
And but they were all young, like yuppie kind of, 20-somethings. And these fucking condos in this place were expensive. So, there's money to be had down here in Tampa, I guess. Mm-hmm. But they were just going from the building to the car, from the building to the car, from the car to the building. The people walking down there, plastic bags on their heads, fucking Walmart shopping bags on their feet as shoes. There was one area underneath this building that had this alcove jutted out. There was a whole camp set up in there. Yeah. There must have been fucking 9 tents and people up in there. Yeah. I hadn't realized, but we had the same situation down here in Tampa.
Yeah, it's everywhere. Some places it's more obvious and a bigger problem than others, but yeah, it is everywhere. Seattle, when I used to travel down to Seattle, when I was able to travel, it's like a third of the people and this is before COVID, pre-COVID, it's like a third of the people are homeless. And the hostel where I stayed at, they were aware of that, and they would occasionally get homeless people who were working, and they would get enough money and they take a break and stay at the hostel briefly just to get a break from being out sleeping rough or whatever. Yeah.
Well, a lot of them, Seattle was known for being a destination for a lot of runaways and people on heroin, and heroin addiction was a big issue for people on the street in Seattle. I know that for a while.
Pacific Northwest, Vancouver included. Yeah. So
we're going to talk about stuff like that. I'm going to talk about Cuba. What do you want to talk about?
Oh, well, I am going to be going into Vancouver, so maybe I'll be able to show what's going on there. Oh, hey, my husband told me when we're going to be in Vancouver for a couple of nights, free nights that we earned because we stayed in a hotel here, our landlord paid for, so we got some free nights. So we're going to stay there. He mentioned to me Extinction Rebellion is gonna hold an event when we're there at a NHL hockey match. What? They're gonna try to disrupt an NHL professional hockey match in Vancouver.
When is this? How long?
What?
How long till that happens?
It's gonna happen the 21st of this month, I believe. Yeah. So I don't know if it's it's probably an evening event or I don't know if it's an afternoon event. Maybe I could show that Extinction Rebellion.
They're gonna wear those fucking stupid costumes, the white costumes and the white fucking masks on their face and march along in synchronicity.
Oh, I looked that up after my husband told me about it. And they were disrupting the traffic around the Vancouver airport, Extinction Rebellion. Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they must have like a local chapter. We
Yes,
don't have,
there is.
we don't have cool shit like that down here in Tampa.
Now, the West Coast does fake left like nobody else can. It's like all the flakes go west.
I'm so jealous.
No.
It's that and the fact that down here in Florida, they try to set up a thing like that. We just tar and feather them and run them off on a rail. We just go back to the 40s or the 50s and say, hey, I get some tar and some pillowcases.
Yeah. So Extinction Rebellion. Yeah.
That would be great. Put that on fucking. That would be awesome. I'd love to see that.
Well, if it's in the evening, it would be too dark. But if it's an afternoon hockey match, that's a possibility. Yeah.
If you know the date, you can easily.
I'm gonna look it up. Yeah. It's a Vancouver Canucks match that they're gonna try to disrupt. Why? I don't know what the.
What's the point of that?
I don't know. I can kind of get the airport thing because they think, oh no, you're creating too much carbon by traveling so much. But I'm not sure what the hockey match is about. I guess just living a normal life and enjoying life is a no-no.
I wonder if they disrupted the airport in Glasgow when those 1,000 private jets came in for all the COP26 fucking convention. That was Glasgow, right? Scotland, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My guess is they didn't disrupt that airport. I'm just gonna guess. Did you see the pictures of all those fucking private jets parked at the fucking airport?
I think there was a fact checking that said that was not true.
That is.
Yeah, they're always fact checking things like that. That's not true.
Snopes and fucking The Atlantic both said it's not true that the emperor is naked. He does have a new set of fucking clothes.
I laugh every day trending on Twitter. There's a fact checking item.
All right, so we're not going to talk about Cuba. I keep trying.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So I found it was a couple weeks ago. I'm on the email list for global research, and I'll kind of glance at the articles, and they publish everything from other outlets. So most of it's crap or sort of okay, and occasionally, not very often, there's some good stuff. So there was an article by the head of global research. He's Professor Michel Chossudovsky. Yeah. So he set up global research, I think, after 9/11 in response to that. That's when it started. 2001 is when they started.
I think he started it before. I'm not sure, but I think he started it before.
It started in 2001. I know that much. So right. I'm guessing.
And I should just point out that they used to take stuff from my website.
Yes,
you're posted on global research. They
That's
used to be very good.
Yeah. Now they publish everything.
Right.
And I got suspicious last year because there were several good articles, 2 or 3 good articles about the origins of COVID. And the Chinese government, showing that, tracing it to the US or to, DIA or whatever. And the Chinese government had cited them when they were defending themselves against, that they had created the virus or its origin was in China. Those articles disappeared. And I had cited them in a video of mine. And once they disappeared, fortunately, I found them on another site. They've been republished. But I got really suspicious of global research for purging those articles from their site.
Global research, I can tell you, having been following them and reading their stuff and been posted on global research over a decade ago, and been following them from long before that, since 2003 and 2005. Some of the stuff that I did, the research that I did, which helped come to a different opinion about 9/11 came from global research and Dr. Michel Chossudovsky. Now, that said, there was a period when they were very popular, and then funny thing happened. They took in some extra money, and they were infiltrated by some people who were not necessarily, I would say, on the up and up. And they started publishing stuff that was questionable, and I think they started also editing fucking comments and removing certain comments. So yeah, I agree with you. But they were really good to start with. They weren't like that since the beginning.
Right.
Anyway, please go ahead.
So the article that caught my eye was by Chossudovsky, and he's unique. So he's firmly on the left. And so he wrote something about Cuba and all the problems there, you know, with the sanctions and blockades and all that. But he's also a COVID skeptic. And so he provided a unique perspective on the COVID agenda in targeted countries. And he had some experience from years ago where he had seen how foreign NGOs were infiltrating and co-opting Cuban intellectuals connected to the Cuban government and pushing Western corporate perspectives in Cuba. And they weren't, what disturbed him, he went to a conference in 2015, where he saw this. A Cuban think tank connected to the Cuban Foreign Ministry held a conference, and the organization funding it was this right-wing German foundation. And so they were pushing some disturbing things that were counter to traditional Cuban government views. And the Cubans there, the intellectuals taking part in the conference, were not countering these perspectives. They were accepting them. Yeah, so it's very disturbing. So he's pointed out what I was last year was very disturbed by the Cuban government's response to COVID. And they went into lockdowns, hard lockdowns for a couple of weeks at a time. And I was supposed to travel there again in September. They suspended flights into Cuba for a month. And I go, what the heck is going on? And they went into lockdown for a couple of weeks. So they had done this off and on, you know, going into lockdown. And other people were saying, what is going on? Why is Cuba doing this? Well, because they've been infiltrated and co-opted. Yeah.
You know, I hate to bring him up again, but again, back in the day, Noam Chomsky did some good work, and he's famous for talking about, one of the things he's famous for, about the capitulation of the liberal intellectual class, not just in the United States, but also being used all throughout the world and countries that we occupy. So I imagine that is an extension of that, you know, finding that venue to get into another country. So what would be the connection between COVID-19 and the less than honest liberal intellectual class that you think is troubling, aside from lockdown maneuvers, which, by the way, China didn't do the entire country, but they did in certain select areas. So what's the connection between these two things in your estimation from what you found?
Okay, I'm not quite sure what the question was. Sorry.
How is COVID being used to infiltrate Cuba?
Oh, well, you know, earlier this year, there were orchestrated protests, an attempted color revolution in Cuba. And so Cuba, it's very heavily dependent on tourism, the tourism industry, to bring in hard currency. So when they were going into lockdowns and suspending flights, that was really creating a lot of hardship for a lot of Cubans.
Right.
And it was real, the sanctions and blockades, whatever. I could see, it's like a war zone in Cuba. You could tell that there's been a war waged against that country for decades. So it's hard enough as it is. And a lot of Cubans, they have all their basic necessities provided. So they do okay. But the Cubans that are involved in catering to the tourists, they do a little bit better. So a lot of Cubans who were dependent on that, they didn't have that. They didn't have the tourists. So, their lifestyles were dramatically changed.
And this would
So
be
the COVID lockdown,
this would be like the upper middle class. I hate to use the word because the fucking fake left use it all the time, but the upper middle class, bourgeois class of Cuba that were doing slightly better than
you can see.
people.
Yeah, you can see there is a difference.
Yeah.
So, and that's deliberate. The West has done this deliberately. All of this is deliberate.
Sure.
Creating social divisions in Cuba and the currency system. So when I was there, and this is still somewhat true, there's the Cuban peso, which is what ordinary Cubans use to pay for all their things that they need. Basic necessities. And I saw a power bill stuck in the door of a home in Cuba, and it was just a few pennies. So that's how heavily subsidized things are there. And then the other currency is a hard currency that is used in the tourism industry. So foreigners pay in the Cuban convertible, the CUC. So you got the CUP, the Cuban peso, and the CUC, the Cuban convertible currency. And it's more or less pegged to the dollar. It's like the dollar, really, the US dollar. So when I was there, it's changed. Apparently they're getting away from the CUC and I think they're accepting dollars, US dollars now. They're phasing out the CUC or something, I think, since I was there. So when I was there, you arrive and I used Canadian dollars. At that time, there was a penalty if you converted from US dollars. So at the airport, I'd get some, and the hotels, you convert your money, exchange your money. So I would give them Canadian dollars and I'd get the CUC to pay for things.
The fact that sounds shocking to me. The fact that you say that they would be using US dollars on the streets in fucking Cuba?
In the stores that cater to, that provide like the things you don't,
That's a big change.
Yeah, I don't know exactly the situation. I just read that they are sort of phasing out the CUC.
Let me ask you a question. As somebody who's been there, and you do a lot of research on it, do you think the current president has the same tenacity as Castro did? Do you think that or even Raul?
Raul has retired from the government, so he's still alive.
I know that.
Yeah.
But do you think the current president has the same stick-to-itiveness that Fidel or even Raul had, his predecessors? Or do you think he might be part of that issue that you said you saw developing, or that Chossudovsky is talking about? Seeing the dollar being accepted in Cuba, if that's really what's going on, that's an indication. I mean, no longer is the CUC pegged to the dollar; it is the dollar.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an indication that maybe what Barack Obama did, opening the place up a little bit, did exactly what it was intended to do. Remember a long time ago when I was talking about Donald Trump and North Korea, and I said, listen, they're not going to bomb fucking North Korea. They might show a force because of the pivot to Asia, but the way they'll get into North Korea is opening the doors a little bit and letting a little bit of fucking capitalism squeak in there and letting the people see it and go, ooh, and want more.
Yeah.
Right? Do you think that's a possibility, what's going on in Cuba today? Do you think maybe the fucking current leadership is not as focused on maintaining the revolutionary ideas that the Castros were? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, it's possible. Like, I don't want to cast shade on the leadership in Cuba, but it could be, I've told people it reminds me of what they were doing in the Soviet Union and the Soviet bloc in the 1980s, and in China in the 1980s, leading up to Tiananmen. This is what it reminds me of. So, Gorbachev was kind of a questionable, some of the things he was introducing, perestroika, restructuring, which is really, it was really neoliberal reforms, and glasnost, which was democracy. So he was introducing these reforms, which the West liked. And the same thing was going on in China. And China, so go ahead, sorry.
No, good.
Oh, so in China, at the highest level, there was Zhao Ziyang, and he was a Western puppet in the party, the Communist Party of China, in the top leadership. So Deng Xiaoping had introduced a market system, and he was trying to break all the blockades and sanctions, really, is what he's trying to do. But he appointed Zhao Ziyang, and before him, Hu Yabang. And so they were neoliberalizing, privatizing the economy in China. And it was creating hardship and legitimate discontent, because some people were suffering. They didn't have the subsidies that they had on things. And there was a George Soros think tank in Beijing, and Zhao Ziyang's main advisor was the head of that think tank. And the CIA, National Endowment for Democracy, had offices in China.
Yeah.
So what's going on in Cuba now reminds me a little bit of the 1980s.
Yeah. And let's go back and be a little more, what you said about Gorbachev is absolutely true, and that's exactly what perestroika was. Mm-hmm. However, they got rid of him and replaced him with Yeltsin for a reason. And the reason was, just like in China, I believe that Gorbachev started seeing that these policies were not achieving what he was told that they would achieve. This economic fucking brick was not going to achieve what he was told they would achieve by the Milton Friedman guys or the Chicago boys. And so he was rolling them back. Much like, by the way, you mentioned Cuba. Another good example of that would be the Prince in Saudi Arabia. He had this whole plan for 2030 and was going to completely privatize and hand over everything to these neoliberals in Saudi Arabia. And people started protesting. There were actual real protests. So he started rolling these things back. Mm-hmm. Next thing you know, Khashoggi's chopped up and in a fucking well someplace. And he's demonized. Yeah. They don't like it when you sign on for their program and then you haven't got the fucking guts to continue with it all the way to the bitter end. They get pissed off at you and you leave.
I've heard that too about Yeltsin designating Putin as his successor. That Yeltsin was having regrets about what was going on, and that's why he appointed Putin. I've heard that. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, by the time Yeltsin was in office and was about on the outs, the hardline communists were coming back to power because life in Russia. I guess it's Russia at that point. It's no longer the Soviet Union at that point. But life in Russia for the average people had gotten so fucking bad. They yearned to go back to fucking communism, believe it or not, hardline communism. So I think Yeltsin did the best he could. There's also talk of the hardliners flexing the muscle on Yeltsin, telling him exactly who he's going to fucking replace, who's going to replace him. The idea there being that Yeltsin didn't have a whole lot of choice when it came to who was going to replace him, because of course Putin was definitely in the favor of these old hardliners and the whole communists. So, but yeah. So, do you think this is something that's happening in Cuba? That they got a taste under the Obama administration of being a bit more open? And I believe Raul was still in charge then.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, of course, now you've got this infiltration you're talking about, and that Professor Chossudovsky is writing about. Do you think what we're seeing now is a changing of the guard ideologically in Cuba?
Well, it's gradual. That's why, when it's so gradual, people don't really pick up on this. So I don't know everything about the leadership. I think the president right now is Canel Diaz. Canel.
It's Diaz.
Yeah. But the whole COVID agenda, what's going on in Cuba is very questionable.
Have they rejected our Moderna and Pfizer?
Yeah, no, that Cuba, they have not allowed in the Western big pharma vaccines. They have developed 5 of their own, and one they export. It's Abdallah, I think that's the name of it. But they have 5, yeah, and so they have
some to Venezuela too.
Yeah, Nicaragua has received the Cuban and the Russian, and I don't know if they've gotten the Chinese. But yeah, that's the thing. They don't have the Western big pharma vaccines. But the agenda of COVID and lockdowns, they have done that. So
are they under lockdown now, or they've lifted the lockdown?
No, they're not. They're getting ready. Oh, so it's been announced in the US. The State Department has announced there's going to be protests again in Cuba, November 15th. And mid-November is when Cuba gets ready for its peak tourism season.
Right.
Yeah. So all of this, so there was remember the San Isidro movement in Cuba last year? There was kind of orchestrated protests, and the US Embassy is a spy base. So they used it. And so there was a US embassy official who was connected to that San Isidro movement. So there was that last year, orchestrated protests. And then this year in July, there were protests, another color revolution attempt. So they're getting ready again. So they have laid the groundwork. They created more hardship with the COVID agenda in Cuba. So, this color revolutions, they're orchestrated, but they do use, legitimate problem. Yeah, they use those. So, you're talking about the dollar. I remember when the last time I left Cuba, at the airport, when you're waiting for your flight, there's like little gift shops, and you pay with US dollar. Yeah, at the airport.
Well, I'm sure that's a convenience thing, because people are leaving or entering, and they haven't had the chance to convert the dollar into what's used inside the country, or they've spent up everything that they had in the country because they couldn't spend anywhere else. And on the way out the fucking country, they see something they want. They got to have something that they can use.
Yeah.
So that makes sense there.
Yeah.
But inside the country is different.
Yeah. What bothered me, I could see problems. What bothered me is I felt like I was segregated from most ordinary Cubans because of the currency. So, you buy things at shops where most ordinary Cubans can't buy stuff.
Right.
And that's what bothered me. Like, I did talk to ordinary Cubans, and I had Cubans tell me, there isn't, you know, people think you can't be open and criticize. They think that Cubans can't say things, complain, or what. They do. I know Cuba, I talked to them.
Yeah.
And so they talked about, you know, how they have basic things, but things aren't subsidized as much as they were when the USSR was a key ally. So they would talk about this stuff, and they did question, you know, how they would see tourists coming in, and, you know, most of the tourists are fairly affluent in comparison. So they weren't happy with that situation where they're saying, you know, luxury hotels in Cuba, and yet, you know, their standard of living, like they have all their basic necessities and free health care. But, right. I mean, you know, they question this stuff.
You can understand that. And of course, you can understand that sentiment when they feel that way, because they're seeing all these Americans coming in. Yeah. Now, like, the Americans live like fucking kings down here, and we live like this.
Yeah.
What's wrong with our system? But what they don't see is that's 1% of the Americans can come down there and travel down there and live like that. The rest of the Americans are living like you, and they wish they had subsidized health care, because they're paying fucking $600, $500, $400 a month for insurance that they can't even use for their fucking families. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, but I understand where they would see that and they would get a somewhat distorted picture and start to question, well, if their system produces everyone living like this and our system produces us living like this, why don't we do that? So I'm sure that's a legitimate feeling down there.
Yeah. And another thing is, like, I had to travel, you know, tourists from the US are not allowed in Cuba. You're not allowed to travel to Cuba as a tourist. So I had to travel as a journalist. But most of the US citizens going there are actually Cuban exiles who live in the US.
Right.
But they have to travel on a Cuban passport. So they are visiting family members, and they help sow the seeds of discontent there. They soften up the people there, their family members. There's no restriction against religious groups going to Cuba, and you know what they're preaching. Oh, yeah. And the first time I was there were cultural groups allowed to go from the US, but they cut out that category. So I saw ballet students with their parents going to the fantastic ballet school in Havana. And there was a cultural group, some people with an arts group or something I talked to, and they had traveled from the US to Cuba. Those groups are not allowed anymore. It's just the Cuban exiles and the religious groups and the odd journalists like me. And I was very rare. I was traveling as an individual, as a journalist, and I wasn't a Cuban exile or anything. And I wasn't with a religious group. So I was really rare individual American. And I deliberately traveled as an American US citizen rather than a Canadian citizen. Yeah. So the people allowed to go into Cuba from US, they have an agenda.
It'd be interesting to see what the State Department's take on Diaz is. And if they're going to, again, relax restrictions like Obama did, to slightly start reopening relations with Cuba under Diaz.
Well, Canel. Diaz is his mother's name.
Canel,
I think that's his name.
Thank you.
The president.
It's interesting to see how that works out in the next 6 months, 9 months. Now, you say that they're already predicting magically some more protests in there.
Yeah.
But remember, color revolutions and these protests can be done in opposition to someone, like, say, Castro, or it can be in support of someone, in order to cause destabilization, to make them come to us, say, oh, you know, we're going to have to negotiate, like the Democrats always have to do with the Republicans now. Oh, we got to kick this out of the bill and this out of the bill, but we're going to keep this stuff. It's a product. It's negotiation.
Right.
So they'll do that in countries like that as well. So it's not really necessarily a given that they have an ultra aggressive take or stance against Canel, just because they're doing some.
It's to put pressure.
Right. And to allow him to say, this is what's going on in our country, and because of this, I have to make these concessions. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He knows what it is. He's actually called for the help. This has been done by other leaders in the past to the United States, into France, and to other places. I'm not necessarily saying that's what Canel is doing, but we don't know. It could vary. We'll have to see what his reaction to it is when it happens.
Well, they're ready.
If he caves in super fast and starts giving in, making concessions, then we know. You know.
Yeah, I don't know, but this is why you will have a lot of people on the left. I've seen on Twitter, they will smear countries or leaders, but they never talk about what's really going on inside these countries. So they will smear Canel, the Cuban president, but they don't really talk about the Western agenda. They just are. It's like all government bad. It's these fake left anarchists or libertarian or whatever. You know, all government is bad. So, but they don't dig into what's going on inside these countries.
It's pronounced government.
Government, yeah. But that's why, you know, you really got to get away from the government analysis of the COVID agenda and really dig into what's really going on. You know, the governments are.
One that makes it so much easier when you get a glimpse into the contracts that these fucking manufacturers make, like Pfizer has, when they go into another country and say, okay, well, you got to give us this, and you got to change this about your economy and change that about your economy. For what? For us to buy goddamn your vaccine? Yeah. Otherwise, you don't get it. You know. That tells you, that gives you great insight right then and there what the whole fucking agenda is all about.
Yeah, in contrast to Nicaragua, they didn't do lockdowns, they haven't done all these restrictions, mandates. Yeah, and so I mean, I know people in Nicaragua, some people question what's going on in Cuba, why they were doing lockdowns, and you know, Nicaragua was not doing that. The Sandinista government, another leftist government, was not doing that. Not going along with the agenda, the COVID agenda.
Especially after the election, I'm sure we're going to see some fucking color revolution protests taking place there as well.
Yeah, they always immediately dismiss the election results and say it's fraud.
Didn't they just do a series of those in 2018? Wasn't there a whole bunch of violent Hong Kong style fucking protests that took place in Nicaragua back then?
Yeah, it was like what we've seen in Venezuela. So yeah, Venezuela, and they had these barricades, you know, a lot of violence. Same thing in Nicaragua. So that's what we might see in Cuba. I don't know. I found another article from Global Research, ironically, that didn't get into COVID, but it did get into a lot of detail about the opposition in Cuba. And there's this sort of false dichotomy. It's either you're openly hostile to Cuba on the right, or you're in support of the Cuban government on the left. Well, there is a third, opposition that sort of plays both sides as well. We don't want this. We don't want the violence from the right wing, and we don't want the violence from the Cuban government. So it's this neither left nor right thing. The end of
third way dudes.
Yes.
Well, we talked about that earlier. You and I talked about that earlier. That goes right along to like people like Bernie Sanders, the fake fucking opposition socialist left, saying, yeah, well, I don't want to support fucking Hillary Clinton and her regime change thing, but Gaddafi's an evil dictator. Yeah. And he said the same thing about fucking Milosevic. He said the same thing about fucking Assad. Said the same thing about fucking Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Says the same shit about the fucking Taliban. There's never been a fucking regime change effort that he hasn't tacitly supported by demonizing the leadership that we want to have removed. So like you said, to your point, it's that third way kind of, we're still going to support it. It's like fucking Max Blumenthal. Back when in 2011, when Max Blumenthal was like, oh yeah, but Assad's a fucking evil dictator, and to hell with all these Assad apologists, like Mother Miriam, right? Who wouldn't, the other guy wouldn't fucking share a stage with at a fucking peace rally, an anti-war rally, to stop us from fucking invading goddamn Syria. Bo, stop that now.
He doesn't like Bernie Sanders. Bo does not like Bernie Sanders.
Doesn't let me talking about Bernie Sanders. He didn't like me. He didn't like me doing that fucking impersonation of Kyle Rittenhouse this afternoon.
Oh, that was funny. I saw that in your video, Bo.
Bo just attacks me. What's wrong with you? Stop doing that shit.
Yeah. So anyway, when I know there's a red flag. If I hear someone or a group saying neither left nor right, I know that's a red flag. And so they'll say it's the end of ideology. It reminds me, Off Guardian was claiming they didn't have any ideology. I'm going, yeah, that's bullshit. They were criticizing Marx. They had a hit piece on Marx, but well, we don't have any ideological views. Are you kidding me? You're clearly libertarian or anarchist or whatever. What are you talking about? The end of ideology. Or, people will say the false paradigm of left and right. Well, there is still a left and right. It's just they've undermined the left so much.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They've married the two, and what they call the left nowadays. It's like when I see like Hotep Jesus and these people, and they're funny. They got good perspective. Yeah. Yet, they're talking about the left being this and the left being that. Dude, that ain't the left.
No.
Dude, that ain't the left. You're talking about fucking the Hillary Clinton left and the fucking Bernie Sanders left and the fucking Barack Obama left and the Nancy Pelosi left. That ain't the left. There is a real fucking left, and the real fucking left is still the same as it was back in the fucking 60s and the 70s. It still exists. We're still out here. Hi, how you doing? I'm not dead yet. The reports of my demise have been greatly exaggerated, as somebody once said, something like that. So that pisses me off as well, because that's not, there is reason to hold to your ideological beliefs instead of just wiping them all out and say, oh, well, whatever, laissez-faire. That's also an ideology, by the way.
Yeah, they think it isn't, but it is. That's why I really appreciated Chossudovsky's piece about Cuba and infiltration and co-opting of intellectuals there, because he tied in the COVID agenda. So he's a solid COVID skeptic. He knows the agenda.
Yep.
And so this was why this was an excellent piece. It confirmed a lot of my suspicions. You really can dig into this, and it's not just Cuba, Iran, China, other countries that are, they go along with the agenda. Not that they're doing, they don't into the big pharma vaccines. They're not doing that sort of thing, but they're kind of going along with the COVID agenda. And why? You can ask why.
Well, again, I'll bring up China. Not because they're going along with the agenda, but because they did some things to start off with regionally and very specifically, even to sections of town, from what I understand. But they did it because they were facing something that they hadn't seen before. Yes, SARS-CoV-2 is real. Thank you, Julie and JP, for that disinformation. But it is real, and it can cause fucking serious harm, especially if you're older, if you're disabled, if you have pre-existing conditions. It can cause serious harm and or death. Younger people, not so much, unless, of course, they have the pre-existing conditions. So when they were facing this to start off with early, they didn't know how to handle it. They didn't know what we know about it now in terms of the demographics and how it's, it took time to figure out that data. All they knew is some people were dying. Of course, the videos of people falling on the ground with fake bullshit. But in reality, they had to deal with that. So they had to deal with that in the only way they knew how. What have I said since the beginning? When you have a virus, when you have a fucking thing like this that you don't know what it is, what do? You isolate it, you contain it,
Quarantine.
Yeah. I mean, that's not unheard of in terms of the history of dealing with viruses. Like I said before in one of my videos, they would fucking wall off entire fucking towns in Europe.
Yeah.
During the Black Plague.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the people inside them were forced to fucking stay in there and either live or die, but that's what they did because that was the only way they knew how to fucking contain things at the time. Well, Cuba doing a little bit of that. People said, and I don't know if this is true or not, but before the Rona actually hit China, not only were there reports of a strange pneumonia-like illness hitting people in places in the United States, but there were reports of it in Iran. And I wonder if it had been sent, because I don't think the Cubans took part in the games, the military games in
I don't know. I don't know if they did or not. I don't know.
Well, they don't have Navy, first of all, and they were the naval games, naval military games. Right. So they don't have a Navy. So they might have some PT boats. I don't know.
Coast Guard. I think there is a Coast Guard. Yeah.
There's a Coast Guard.
Yeah.
I don't know if they wouldn't have sent it into Cuba specifically. So again, I don't know what the time frame for those lockdowns were for Cuba, and I don't know if they're continuing. They said they're not continuing now. You went into Cuba at a certain point during all of this last year.
2019, December 2019, I left Cuba. I tried to travel back to Cuba last year, but the flight was canceled because the Cuban government suspended flights.
And that was September.
Yeah, and they had already had a lockdown suspending flights before, at least once before. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were doing it periodically in Cuba.
I thought you did. I thought you were still able to get some Cuban cigars last year. I guess not.
Oh, that was 2019, before all this happened.
Yeah. Okay. So, to their defense, I'm not as worried about the lockdowns, right? As in terms of carrying on the Western agenda. I'm not necessarily sure just because a country locks down that they're following the Western agenda. I know North Korea did to some degree, but North Korea has said they had fucking 0 COVID deaths. So
and they tested tens of thousands of people, and they didn't find any. In North Korea, they tested tens of thousands of people.
Yeah.
And didn't find any cases.
So I'm not entirely sure you could look at it one of two ways. One, maybe it's 3 ways. One, like what I just said, this is just a typical way of dealing with it, with a contagion that they don't understand, had no good way of controlling. 2, it is part of the Western agenda being carried on in that country. Or 3, it is an attempt to keep the Western agenda out of their fucking country. It is an attempt to keep what they saw as a contagion from the rest of the world out of their fucking country, like North Korea did.
Yeah, it's not clear cut or simple, and countries are not monolithic.
Right.
Governments are not monolithic. There's a lot of different influences. Like China is not a closed society. They're open to the West, so. But I do remember when this started, I wondered why China was using the term lockdown. I thought, well, that's odd. I wonder about that.
Were they using a word that translates to lockdown? Or was it us translating their word to lockdown?
I don't know what the word in Chinese was, but in Chinese media, in English, they were using the term lockdown. I'm going, why are they saying lockdown? Mm. And in Hubei province around Wuhan, where they had the lockdown, it wasn't like in the West. So the hair salons were still open. Unlike here, for months, the hair salons were closed. So the lockdown wasn't like what it was being done in the West. The stores were still open. The supermarkets were still open. I think the transit system was shut down, you know, so people walked to the supermarkets or whatever, did whatever, and they could go in the hospital. So it wasn't like in the West. So in Wuhan, the lockdown was definitely not like in the West, and it was limited to Wuhan, Hubei province. It wasn't nationwide. But why they were using the term lockdown in English, I go, what?
I'm just curious if that's not whoever was making the translation from the Chinese to the English version for the English website, if it wasn't their choice to translate whatever word was being used.
Why didn't they say quarantine? It was more of a quarantine than lockdown.
That's a good question. Maybe they were using the Chinese word for quarantine, and whoever was doing the English version translated it rather than quarantine to lockdown. I don't know.
I don't know. And unless now, yeah.
Unless you spoke Chinese, I read, unless you read Chinese, or is it Mandarin? What do they use? Mandarin?
Mm-hmm.
Unless you read that, there'd be no way to know the answer to that question.
Yeah, and I had read that actually the lockdown was lifted because in China, because Xi Jinping said this is, you know, saw what was going on, and he said this is not necessary because the cases and the deaths were relatively low.
What?
Yeah. And right now I think they have a zero COVID policy now in China, which I wonder about. You know, you're not going to get rid of COVID. It's like trying to get rid of the common cold or the flu.
Again, you know? That's the zero COVID thing. That's language that you see at the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, and that's the policy I think they have in China. So they had one case. You know, if they have one case,
they would lock down a specific area.
The Disneyland, what was it? Disneyland Shanghai was shut down because some lady had visited. There was one case of a lady who had visited the Disney Shanghai park. She wasn't there at the time, but because they had a positive case, someone who had been there, they shut down the park from the afternoon into the evening and tested everybody.
Remember that conversation I got into with that individual, and then you were involved in it as well, talking about what was going on with China, and the fact that, you know, I said, this is a vaccine passport, and you got pissed off at me, and this guy comes in. Let me finish, please.
Yeah.
If you show him one of these, and you got to show it, at first you were saying it had nothing to do with fucking COVID, and then the guy comes in and says, yes, of course it's got to do with COVID.
Well, I didn't know.
But he said it's not a vaccine passport. But then, what did he say at the end? He said, well, yeah, there's an icon on there. And if the icon is yellow, you've got this. If it's green, then you're fully vaccinated. Ergo, that means it's a fucking vaccine passport.
Yeah, now, they call it a heart health app or something.
They call it a green pass. And green pass is being used in other places as well. But aside from
that. No, in China, they don't call it a green pass. It's a health app or something. I forget.
It's an app on WhatsApp or whatever it is. So let me just finish. What he did say is exactly what you're talking about. And that was, well, they don't only have lockdowns unless, of course, you happen to be somebody who was at that. He didn't use Disney, but you just used Disney, so I'll say that. Unless, of course, you happen to have been contact traced through Disney when that one person showed up. And then, of course, they're going to contact you and say, now your green fucking icon turns fucking red, and you have to stay at home. Well, he had no problem with that. And I kept saying, China has 1.5 billion fucking people, give or take. 5,600 COVID deaths total in a year, in 18 months. Yeah. And they're doing that. Now, I got a lot of grief for me talking to this guy this way from a number of people. But the reality is, that's exactly what we're talking about. That's a vaccine passport. That's contact tracing.
Yeah,
and like you said, they're developing a zero COVID.
Yeah, I learned that since. Yeah, so I understand what you're saying. And I would point out.
I just saw it as troubling when I saw that video the guy made, and the people having to show the thing to get into a church.
Yeah. And you pointed out it could be just the church doing that, but the fact that there's this app, yeah, which
And
is
you're
essentially,
pointing out just now that there's a zero fucking COVID policy. So
yeah,
it's not just the church, is it?
yeah. I don't, yeah, no. That since then, my understanding is they have a zero COVID policy in China now. I don't think they did before. And another thing, so Cuba, when I wasn't able to travel last September of last year, they had really not that many cases and really not that many deaths. So that's why I was wondering, why are they going to lock down, suspending flights, like a hard lockdown? And I think when they do that, I think it's mainly Havana, or it's just Havana. I don't know, because that's where most of the flights, all flights from the U.S. can only go into Havana now.
Was any of this touched on by the article that you read from Michel Chossudovsky?
About what? About Cuba? Or he didn't get into a lot about COVID. He just connected what he had experienced in Cuba years ago at this conference to the COVID agenda, and what the Cuban government has been doing, going along with the COVID agenda. Not everything, the vaccines or what. I mean, they don't have a vaccine mandate. They have a campaign to get everybody vaccinated, but they don't have a vaccine mandate. And it's because the tourism industry, they want to get like 90% of the population vaccinated so that they can be open for tourism. Yeah. So they can't be seen as a danger zone or something by some Western government.
That's curious. If you post a link when you post this video to that Michel Chossudovsky article, I'd be interested in reading it.
It's very interesting, yeah. I will.
And now that we're wrapping up, because we've been doing this for an hour, I'd like to take us out with this. You ready? You ready?
What?
Sing along with me. Dun, 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 dun.
I never watched the show, but I know the theme.
You never watched it?
No, I never watched it. Dun, 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 dun.
Oh, I think I was talking to James. I don't know if it got on one of the videos or not, but I was talking to James about it. He goes, "Oh, we were watching all the time. Weren't you watching?" I was like, "No." I was like, I watched things like Hill Street Blues. I didn't watch the A-Team.
What was it, Mr. T? What was his name?
It was Mr. T, and you had a guy named Face, and you had some guy, Barabbas, or whatever his fucking name was, who had a cigar, and it was kill them all, let God sort them out. Oh my God, it was so fucking funny. Dun, 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 6 million Jews. You knew I was going to say that.
Oh, I liked on one of your videos today, everybody was calling you a Jew or a commie.
Only a Jew would fucking make something like this. Like, what does that got to do with anything?
I saw the comments before I watched the video, and then I watched the video and going, what's the problem here? I don't get it. Why are you a Jew or a commie?
The problem was that they didn't watch the video. I started off saying the guy was innocent. He shouldn't be prosecuted. And I ended saying the guy, just in case somebody fucking missed it, I ended saying the same goddamn thing. You're a Jew, you're a commie. Really?
I know. Oh my God.
Oh, I got last I checked, it was 6 likes to 20,000 dislikes.
Yes. Oh, YouTube. Apparently YouTube is going to hide the thumb count or the downvotes or something.
Bitchute or YouTube?
YouTube. Because the White House videos are getting so many thumbs down. And Fauci. Yeah, Fauci is getting so many thumbs down. So you can't show that now. Something, I don't know.
You can choose to do that on your YouTube.
Yeah. I noticed that about some channels, yeah. But YouTube, I don't know if this is true. This was on Twitter, that Disclosed TV account was saying YouTube's going to hide the thumb count or the downvotes. I don't know.
I'll retweet some stuff from Disclosed, but I don't, I'm not going to cite them.
Yeah, I don't know if it's true or not. I haven't seen it yet on YouTube, so I don't know.
That's true. Dun, 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 dun. That was so the videos with James are fun.
Yeah.
The videos with James are funny. I'm supposed to do one today sometime. I'm posting one up right now. It takes fucking forever because we do it like an hour and a half. It's like a movie.
Yeah.
And this one it's an hour and 20-minute video. And like an idiot, I put this blueprint up of this. You remember the tower that we built? I built in one of them, big ass tower, 300 and something fucking logs. So it's like fucking 100 fucking trees we got to chop. We literally spend 50 minutes of an hour and 15-minute video swinging around chopping down trees. That's funny.
Yeah, I was going to comment on one of those where you were chopping down so many trees. I was going to say, if you chop down enough trees, you're going to have to rename the game the desert.
The desert. The wrecked forest. We talked the whole time about it. I mean, it's funny as shit because I was talking to James in one of these fucking things, and I was like, there's this video I watched about 10 fucking video games that just have just this horrible message, and in one aspect or another of the fucking game, they didn't even touch the forest. And the whole point of the forest is, you land, you're a fucking white guy, and you just completely decimate the fucking forest, and you kill all the goddamn inhabitants, and you're wearing their bones, and you got a skull on your fucking head. You just turn into a fucking monster. As soon as you end up in the fucking on an island with some fucking, natives, you take advantage. The whole point is you run around and find things. You find fucking pieces of like a gun, explosives. So you find all the flare guns. So you find all this technology. So it makes it easy for you to fuck up these people. And you get a chainsaw so you can cut down their fucking trees faster and wreck their whole goddamn island. And that's your part in the fucking. You were actually the bad guy in the fucking video game. And they didn't even mention.
You're in Cuba.
Right. We could talk about Far Cry 6.
Yeah.
How I won't fucking buy that shit.
Yeah.
Not only is it just a retread of all the other fucking Far Cries, using the same goddamn mechanics and the same shit, but now they've just turned you into a goddamn CIA guy trying to unite the fucking opposition to violently overthrow fucking Castro. That's the whole fucking point of Far Cry 6. That's why I won't buy him.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Cuba, there's a lot more that I know about Cuba that I found from another article that I will talk about in my video, or I might have to make more than one video. I want to make another one about Nicaragua too, situation there. Anyway, yeah, that Chossudovsky article, very good. And this other very detailed article, which doesn't include the COVID agenda, but it's very good about the opposition and the different groups in Cuba. Opposition, the puppets. Yeah, a lot of detail in this other article I found from Global Research again. So every now and then there's a good article on Global Research, but that site in general, I don't endorse it. That's why I filter, I'll get the email and I'll see if there's anything good.
Yeah, because they will post up some straight up disinformation.
Oh yeah, a lot.
Back in the day, I was seeing fucking anti Gaddafi stuff posted up right beside, some stuff that was pro Gaddafi and talking about the Green Revolution and stuff like that and the history of it and how they're destroying it. And then right next to it, there'd be some fucking shit about, but he's an evil dictator.
Yeah.
So you get that shit on fucking Global Research now as well. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, is that it? We done?
I hope so. Yeah.
You hope so.
Because we were talking for a while before we started recording.
I know.
I'm getting hungry.
Was that a Lincoln shirt? What is that on your shirt? Who's on your shirt?
Oh no, this is Edgar Allan Poe.
It's Edgar Allan Poe.
And the Crow, Richmond, Virginia. I got this at the Poe.
Okay. First of all, it's not a crow.
Oh, Raven. Sorry. It's in the Crow family. The Raven.
But you got that from the museum?
Yeah.
I told you to go to the museum. That's cool.
Yeah. Richmond.
Yeah, that's cool. Did you have a chance to get on the Annabelle Lee? Was it running?
What?
Annabelle Lee is a faux steam-powered paddle boat that runs up and down the James River.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it goes on a one-day cruise. I mean, like 30 miles down, comes back 30 miles. You can drink, and they got all kinds of Edgar Allan Poe stuff. It's named after Annabelle Lee, which was, I think, his girlfriend, wife, something.
Didn't know he wrote. Wasn't there a piece of his that was called Annabelle Lee? Annabelle Lee? I'm not sure.
That's possible.
I don't know. Yeah.
Anyway, we used that steamboat in a film. I forget what film it was, but we had to come and dress it out and make it look like a old-timey fucking real steamboat. It was a Civil War piece movie that I worked on in Richmond. So we had to dress it up and add some stuff to it to make it look, like a real old steamboat, and take your shit off. That was cool. I don't know if they were still running it when you were there now.
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, the reason I said crew, I remember I have another t-shirt I got from the Edgar Allan Poe Museum, and it's in French, and they have the French word for raven, which is the same word as crow. That's why I said that. Le corbeau. That's why I said that. So I don't know. In French, it's the same word. I don't know. I don't know if they have ravens in France. They might only have crows, so maybe that's why.
I think they're the same thing, aren't they?
They're in the same family. There is a difference.
No.
Ravens are kind of the indigenous people.
Are ravens smaller?
No, they're bigger. Oh, they're bigger, and they sound different too. Yeah, and they're very smart, like crows are. And then that's why the indigenous people here have a great deal of respect for the crow or the raven, because and they call him the trickster in indigenous mythology. He's the trickster because he's really smart and he can outsmart people. Yeah.
Okay. Are we good?
Oh, that's it. That's a good talk.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Dun, 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 dun,
Dun,
dun,
dun, dun. God.
That's because we're the A-team.
Okay. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I guess I'm trying to wrap it up here. Thanks, Scott, for joining me.
It's my pleasure, as always.
I will post this on YouTube. We'll see what happens. Because I'm kind of anxious. I think that on my video on Cuba, I've been debating, do I post this on YouTube or not, or put it on Bitchute? It's harder to post on Bitchute. So. But this will go on YouTube anyway.
Okay.
We'll see.
And I'll do a mirror on Bitchute tomorrow.
Okay, good. Yeah. It might be gone. It might be gone from YouTube then. I don't know.
Might be gone.
We'll see.
You might be kicked off.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.